In 1985, there was a movie released called Back to the Future. It led to a couple of sequels, became this global phenomenon. It was set in 1985, the adventures of a college student called Marty McFly, starring Michael J. Fox, along with this eccentric scientist by the name of Dr. Emmett Brown. And together, you might remember, they hop in their vehicle, their kind of sports vehicle, and sail off into the adventures of time travel. So they go back in time, and then they go forward in time. How many of you remember the movie? Yeah, I'm sure like all of us, right? Any of you know the date where they go forward to in the movie? Yeah, 21st of October, 2015. That's like 10 days from now. So I thought it'd be really good just to watch a snapshot of that movie, just a little clip. And this is the vantage point the writers of that movie had in 1985 as they thought about the future in October 2015. Let's roll tape.
The future.
Welcome to Texaco. You can trust your car to the system with the star. Checking oil. Checking landing gear.
Shark still looks fake.
Hi, friends. Goldie Wilson III for Wilson Hover Conversion Systems. When my grandpa was mayor of Hill Valley, he had to worry about traffic problems. But now, you don't have to worry about traffic. I'll hover convert your old road car into a Skyway Flyer for only $39,999.95. So come on down and see me, Goldie Wilson III, at any one of our 29 convenient locations. Remember, keep 'em flying.
We can go on. If you, many of you will probably get the movie out this week and have a bit of a watch. But, there's lots of things that the movie gets right. As the people back in this vantage point in 1985 look forward to October 2015, they see a lot of video screens around the place. I guess you could argue that's there. They see a lot of conference calls being made on video, which didn't exist back then, but it's pretty commonplace now. They see a whole bunch of other things, even people wearing these high-tech spectacles that can give weather forecasts and take photographs and video, which I guess like Google Glass. One of the things I remember about the movie is the hoverboard. And then I came across this little gadget the other day, which somebody in our church owns, and I thought this was pretty cool. So I thought, do you want me to do a demonstration? Not quite the hoverboard, but hopefully I survive on it. Otherwise, that might be a short message. So I think there we go, something like that. Oh, I almost went to the baptistry earlier today. It's a pretty cool little gadget, eh? You can go apparently quite fast. I don't know why people use these things, but they are pretty cool, Good little prop for a sermon anyway. And, different things about, the future. The movie, though, gets a few things wrong, though, doesn't it? There's no flying cars, at least that I'm aware of, certainly not commonplace. And Jaws, I think Jaws 19 in that 3D image, I think we stopped about Jaws 3 or 4, thankfully. But, from the vantage point of 1985, as the movie producers, writers looked ahead to October 2015, that's what they saw. Today, I want to look at the future And the picture the Bible gives to us about the future is from a vantage point of people that were in the first century, so almost 2,000 years ago. And they wrote about the future of what they would see, inspired by the Spirit of God. Different vantage point. Many of you going through the New Testament challenge, reading through the New Testament over these 8 weeks. So a lot of, if you're doing that, you'll come across the book of Revelation, the last book in the New Testament, this next week or two. It's a pretty hard book to understand, isn't it? As people, the writer John, sitting down to pen under the inspiration of the Spirit, these things about the future, things that were way off. So I want us to talk about that today. Before we jump in, though, I want to mention, a couple of guardrails we need to have. The first is to ensure that we don't get sidetracked by speculation. I see this all the time. When people start thinking about end times and the future, they just get sidetracked by all this detail and by all sorts of dates. I was thinking back about even just the last few years, some of the dates I've heard Christian people promote as when Jesus will return. So here's one picture that a friend of mine took just over the last a few months ago. This is in New York, talking about October 7th, having new heaven and new earth. That was this last Wednesday, wasn't it? And I was thinking, okay, so a Wednesday night news, if I remember it correctly, I think it was like all about the TPPA agreement and then a lot of rugby commentary. I didn't hear about like asteroids crashing and kind of new heaven, new earth. We seem to have missed it. Something seemed to go wrong. But a lot of people on the placards, New York, Times Square, saying, well, end of the earth was coming this last Wednesday. Here's another picture. Someone just photographed a few months. This is going back now. I took this in February, March 2011. It was down on the billboard down in Balmoral Road intersection. But different sponsors came around this one to say they listened to probably way too much familyradio.com with a guy called Harold Kemper, who said the end of the world was certainly coming 21st of May 2011. What happened that day? Well, pretty much the same as happened on the 20th of May and the 22nd of May. Can't remember the end of the world coming. And in fact, Harold Kemper acknowledged that himself. So he came up with a new date 5 months later on the 21st of October 2011. What happened on the 21st of October 2011? Well, I had to look at my calendar, and it's a Friday. I took the day off, took the kids out, and I can't remember, again, asteroids falling or end of the earth or anything kind of noticeable. And yet people get caught up in these things all the time. That same year in 2011, was the end of the Mayan calendar. Heard a lot of Christians rallying around, well, this must be the end of the world because the Mayan calendar is about to run out, and there's huge panic about that. And the Nostradamus prophecies all finishing the 21st of December that year as well, and people got all worked up about that. Again, it didn't happen. Many of you can remember back to Y2K. That 31st of December into 1st of January, the turn of the century. And there was huge panic, building up to that the year or two prior. We thought that, planes were going to crash and economies were going to suffer and all this kind of weird stuff was going to happen. And again, the church came around that. Many churches, this is the end of things. It's all prophesied. And yet, I remember 1st of January 2000. It was an ordinary day. Sun was nice. We went out to the beach, just relaxing. It's great. We seem to get caught up and sidetracked, don't we? Every handful of years, someone somewhere will come around it and talk about a new date, and this will happen and that will happen, and a huge number of Christian people get kind of sucked up and sidetracked by the speculation. They post things on Facebook and they put things on YouTube and they rally around and they send things to pastors like me wanting to promote things and just get sidetracked by all this speculation. The Bible actually speaks a bit about this. It says, Jesus said, no one knows the day or hour when these things will happen. Not even the angels in heaven or the Son himself, only the Father knows. And yet, why is it that people have the audacity to come up with dates and actually use the Bible to do so? It's nuts. But it's not just about the dates. It's a lot of the details. I was thinking back over the last 42 years of my life and the things that I've been encouraged or discouraged to do because of things that were supposedly prophesied. And so, I've been told not to use barcodes, buy anything with a barcode, or use an FPOS card when they first come out, because it might be part of the One World movement, and we might be supporting it in some way. There's an obsession with the number 666. So every leader who had, 6 digits in his name, or maybe that was the Antichrist, or maybe, and so Saddam Hussein was kind of on the list for a while, and the Pope has been on the list for a while, and different people have been there, all because of something going on. Some new technology will come out. And some believer will say, oh, that's kind of this thing over here, or we've got TVs, and the Bible says, every eye will see the coming of Jesus, and now we have TVs. Of course, it was at a time when the majority world never had TV, so probably the West could see something, but certainly not everyone else. It just seemed to get a little weird about all these things. It's almost like people read the book of Revelation and then have a herald in the other hand and try to equate the two. And so as soon as people see a new, union take place of some kind, or some political thing, or some new technology, or some new leader with 6 digits in his name, we all get caught up in that and sidetracked by silly speculation. And believers get sucked into this again and again and again, and we become backward. We become weird. We become anti-innovation. Because we're so scared of supporting some system with some antichrist that we, might lose our salvation, which is wrong theologically when you just stop and think about that whole thing. When you sit back and think, prophecy by its very nature is a lot easier to see in hindsight, isn't it? It's a lot easier to see in the rear view mirror than actually looking ahead. Like Back to the Future, when they think of October 2015 and what the world was meant to look like back in 85. It's a lot easier to see in hindsight. Even the religious scholars, just prior to Jesus coming, as they read the Hebrew scriptures and they spoke about a Messiah, they said, well, there's kind of this victorious Messiah and there's a suffering Messiah, that there must be 2 Messiahs. And so that's what they would promote, that's what they would teach. And then Jesus came, the Messiah came, and they suddenly realized, actually, in hindsight, this makes sense now. The Messiah who would suffer and through his suffering would become victorious. But no one saw that coming when they read the Hebrew scriptures. They could see it after the event. It all made sense. A lot of prophecy is so much easier to see in hindsight, isn't it? In the rear view mirror. Now, I think that should give us a bit of a warning, about speculation. Don't get sidetracked by speculation. But also, don't dismiss the idea of an end time. I guess it's the other pole, isn't it? It's really easy. Perhaps you've heard people talk about end times, or a pastor like me will start talking about things like this, and you kind of just throw the whole thing out. Eyebrows raised. It's like, here we go again. But the Bible does talk about an end time. It does talk about things in the future. So the Apostle Peter writes this. Most importantly, I want to remind you that in the last days, scoffers will come, mocking the truth and following their own desires. They will say, well, what happened to the promise that Jesus is coming again? From before the times of our ancestors, everything has remained the same since the world was first created. Monday gives way to Tuesday, Tuesday to Wednesday, Wednesday to Thursday, this year to the next, this decade to the next, this century to the next. Where is this coming? And maybe you're feeling a bit like that too. Well, maybe we should just throw out this whole idea because it's been a while. And yet Peter and the Bible would actually say, no, there is an end time. Don't get sidetracked by speculation, but don't ditch the whole concept either. So what I want to do today is provide 5 clear truths about the future that all good, godly, biblical scholars hold to. I'm not going to talk about what's unclear. I'm going to talk about what's really clear. Now, I know some of you would like me to talk about different, positions or use different words or, speculate a little bit on different things going on. I'm not going to do that. You can talk to me afterwards about things like that. You can do some reading, discussions among yourselves. I just want to focus on what we can be sure of from the Bible as we come and look at the future. Now, I'm also aware, as I mentioned before, that many of you will be reading the book of Revelation over the next week or two. And there are some weird images in the book, if you haven't already come across it before. A slaughtered lamb who sits upon a throne with a scroll in his hand, who gets married. That's weird. Or a woman who looks like the sun, or a red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns. It seems like something, Peter Jackson would write, not something we would expect to see in, biblical genre. And so we probably need some help with that. And so on our website, this afternoon and for the next few weeks, there's some resources there that would help you in your reading. I've just recommended about 3 or 4 books that are there of kind of different levels, depending on where you are and kind of your engagement of that will just help you. You can purchase those, or there's also some definitions of terms people often use when they talk about end times discussions. That's all there. You can look at the website later. Today, though, I just want to focus on what we can be clear of from the Bible. 5 truths. And I'm going to go through these pretty fast. You might want to jot them down and come back and think about them later. Truth number 1, we are already in the last days. When someone asks me, hey, Jonathan, what do you think? Are we in the last days? I can say with absolute confidence, yes. And the reason I can say that is not because I've just picked up the newspaper and read about, the latest war and last leader with 6-digit, name or, something like that. It's just because that's the language the Bible gives for the time after Jesus died, rose, and ascended to his Father till he returns. This period is called the last days. This is what we read in the book of Hebrews. In the past, God spoke to our forefathers through the prophets at many times and in various ways, but in these last days, he's spoken to us by his Son. John writes in his letter these words, "Dear children, the last hour is here." You see, the last day, it's this phrase the Bible gives for this period straight after Jesus' ascension to the time he would return again is all the last days. Now, been at least 2,000 years so far. It seems a long period, but it's this time of anticipation. We'll come back to that in a moment. First truth, we are in the last days. Truth number 2, Jesus will return to the earth again. He came the first time, didn't he? 2,000 years ago, born in a manger, lived among us, died, rose again, ascended to his Father. The first time he came was to bring about salvation, to do what was necessary for everything to be renewed. His second coming will be to finish his work. The foundation of it has been done. He's going to come to renew everything that has been broken, everything that was harmed from the fall and the brokenness of our world. Renewing us, renewing our world, renewing everything that needs to be put right. So we read in Hebrews. So Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many people. He will appear a second time, not to bear sin, but to bring salvation to those who are waiting for him. Finish the job. Characters in the Old Testament like Abraham were waiting for the coming of the Messiah. They knew about the promise and they waited 2,000 years for the first coming of Jesus. Been waiting, 2,000 years for his second coming already. But know this, Jesus will return to the earth again. Truth number 3. Preceding his coming will be a time of turmoil on the earth, and the Antichrist will appear. Scripture is clear that there are various people throughout history and in our future that will make life difficult for the followers of Jesus. And the New Testament speaks about a particular person, often described as the Antichrist. That description often obviously says what this person's about, doesn't it? That opposed to Jesus. And so we read about this character in many different verses. John writes in his letter in 1 John, "Dear children, the last hour is here. You've heard that the Antichrist is coming, and already many such Antichrists have appeared. From this we know that the last hour has come." So there is this one main Antichrist, but there's kind of this succession of Antichrists, leaders who are opposed to Jesus, who make life difficult for the followers of Jesus. And Paul talks about this too. He says, "Don't be fooled by what they say. For that day will not come until there is a great rebellion against God, and the man of lawlessness, or this Antichrist, is revealed, the one who brings destruction. He will exalt himself and defy everything that people call God and every object of worship. He will even sit in the temple of God, claiming that he himself is God. This man will come and do the work of Satan with counterfeit power and signs and miracles. Revelation, if you're reading through the New Testament challenge, you're going to read a lot about this character. Revelation 13 particularly talks a lot about this. It talks about him being like a beast, not because he's an ugly type of fellow, but just using this imagery to try to convey how nasty this character really is. I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, and the sea in Revelation is always the symbol of chaos. That this beast looked like a leopard, but it had the feet of a bear and the mouth of a lion. Talk about weird. And he spoke terrible words of blasphemy against God, slandering his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. And the beast was allowed to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. So this Antichrist character is going to be there, but also it's kind of a succession of people who are opposed to Jesus. So, but we're not meant to, from that, just go, well, who is this Antichrist? And start to look at the herald for everybody that has, 6 digits in their name or something like that. Rather, verse 10 of Revelation 13 says what we should do. It says, this means God's holy people must endure persecution patiently and remain faithful. In other words, we shouldn't be surprised if believers have a tough time. We shouldn't be surprised if there is persecution at times. Now, we often have, times, maybe a tough time here in New Zealand. But there are brothers and sisters, Christians all over the world who are having a really tough time. In fact, church historians would talk about, more people being martyred for their faith in this century than in previous centuries. A lot of people having tough times. And we should expect that in the future. We shouldn't be surprised if we have a tough time for being a follower of Jesus. This kind of goes with the territory. The name the Bible gives for this kind of devoted period of persecution is the tribulation. People disagree over how long that period is, and some see it as a 7-year period, some see particular things happening in the middle of that. But what's clear is that it will be a difficult time with a leader who is opposed to Jesus and his followers. What else is clear? Number 4. After Jesus' second coming, there will be a final judgment for everyone. We as Christians believe that there will be a bodily resurrection of all people. People for whatever period they lived. We will all one day stand before Jesus and give an account for the way that we have lived. There will be a final day of reckoning. Justice will be dispensed. People will get what they deserve. At that time, people that are clinging to something or someone else for their identity, security, purpose in life will get what's coming to them. People who find Jesus to be their identity, security, salvation, will find that Jesus has paved the way for them because their security is based in him and his work. This is eternal consequences, isn't it? The whole heaven and hell discussion. And we'll talk more about that another time. Serious implications, isn't it? The Bible doesn't mess around with the topic. It's clear and upfront that there will be a final day of judgment for everybody. The 5th truth. There will be a new heaven and a new earth with all evil finally and fully destroyed. At the very beginning of the Bible, we read about how God created everything, and within that, he planted this garden himself called Eden. Eden means, bliss or delight. And then he placed people in that garden, and then everything kind of went haywire, didn't it? Pear-shaped. The end of Revelation talks again about this Eden garden, how God created something so good, and then it went pear-shaped, but God is going to restore all things, and in the end of time, this new earth and new heavens and everything, the chaos that we've got so acclimatized to, gone. Cosmic renewal of earth and heaven, the absence of brokenness, of sin and injustice, the reconciliation of people with God. The last chapter of the Bible, just a little snapshot, let me read it to you. I saw a new heaven and a new earth, John writes. For the old heaven and the old earth had disappeared and the sea was also gone. I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, look, God's home is now among his people. He will live with them and they will be his people. God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. All these things are gone forever. And the one sitting on the throne said, look, I am making everything new. It's almost like this happily ever after story for believers. But it's real. It's going to happen. I guess if you were going to sum up the big idea of future events from a biblical standpoint, you could say it's just two words. God wins. You know, all this chaos that we experience, everything that kind of goes pear-shaped in life, God will win. God wins. It's huge comfort for the people of God. So what are we meant to do with these 5 truths? You know, I've gone through these 5 truths. You know, we're already in the last times. 2, Jesus will return to the earth again. 3, preceding his coming, there'll be a time of turmoil on the earth and the Antichrist will appear. 4, after a second coming, there'll be a final judgment for everyone. And then 5th one, there'll be a new heaven and a new earth with all evil fully and finally destroyed. But what does that mean to you and me right now? I want to finish with just 3 implications that we can take to the bank, implications that we should think about and reflect on in our own lives. The first is that we need to be urgently focused on witnessing. God has given a very clear mission. Part of that mission is to witness to others, to let other people know about the hope that we have that can also be theirs. Often in the Bible, we see people asking about time and dates and details. And Jesus tells us not to be sidetracked about that, but to get on with what the real mission is about. So one day, Jesus, responds to his disciples in Acts 1. We read, so when the apostles were with Jesus, they kept asking Jesus, Lord, has the time come for you to free Israel and restore our kingdom? Is this kind of when you're doing it? Can you give us the time? Can you give us the date? Jesus replies to their question. The Father alone has the authority to set those dates and times, and they're not for you to know. It's none of your business. Don't get sidetracked by that. And then he goes on and he says what they should be about. He says, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses, telling people about me everywhere. So don't get sidetracked about all the dates and details, but be witnesses. Letting people know about the hope that you have so that they can experience this hope for themselves as well. Now, that doesn't mean we need to wear placards with, the end is nigh all around the street. It doesn't mean we have to hide, gospel leaflets in people's books that fall out. And, it just means we just need to be real with people. To be upfront, hey, I'm a follower of Jesus. This is how I live. I don't always get it right. This is what I believe in and why I believe it. Let me put a plug in here for next week. It's a great opportunity. Brian mentioned before, we're going to be screening the quarterfinal of the All Black game. Which is a little weird, isn't it, for churches to do that, in an auditorium on a Sunday. Great opportunity. I mean, all of you, even if you're not rugby mad, you have friends who are rugby mad, right? Easy invite to say, hey, our church is doing a breakfast next week, and at 8 o'clock we're going to watch the live screening. And then after that, we just got this 25-minute service. And then, we're going to go serve our city and foster the common good in our city, do some good things. You can join us in doing that if you want, or just come to the game. Easy invite, easy way to talk about your faith, easy way to talk about who we are as a church. Really good. Go after that. Good opportunity. First implication, be urgently focused on witnessing. Second implication, be hopeful for the future. Often when I hear people talk about end times, it always seems to be doom and gloom. Asteroids falling and, this bad thing happening and this bad thing happening. And it's true that there's some nasty things to come. But there's a little phrase the Bible often uses when it talks about the future. Just 2 words, blessed hope. Blessed hope. You see, there's a good news story. There's something we can take to the bank. It's this blessed hope. And so throughout the Bible, we can hear these stories of what is to come, our experience of this blessed hope. Imagine a broken world that will be fixed. A new earth being this Garden of Eden brought to its final destination. Flourishing, pure, healthy, beautiful. Our relationships with each other being rich and deep. No more loneliness. No more gossip. No more backstabbing. No more power plays. No passive-aggressive behavior. No more feeling isolated. Every time another human being touches another would be to give encouragement and to give blessing. Vulnerable, enjoyable, healthy relationships. A place where you will never feel threatened by another person. Where your kids will be able to play without you feeling nervous. Where you could leave your laptop on the back seat with the window wide down and somebody would just walk by and go, hey, that person's trusting. Neat. Where people will be whole again. No more insecurity. No shame. No twinge of guilt. No fear anymore. Where your mind will be your friend. It won't project anything false. It will be conformed to reality. You will see yourself the way God sees you. Your body will be healthy. No more sickness, no cancer, no death, no pain, no struggle with addiction, no propensity to sin. Jesus will renew all things. You see that the end is not doom and gloom, but for followers of Jesus, it is a blessed hope. Glorious future. Second implication is be hope-filled. Maybe many of you right now are just having a tough time. Cling on to that hope. Final implication. Be ready in anticipation. I think many of us have lost this. We get so caught up in the day-to-day aspects of life. Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, and just work and school and uni again, and the same old. And we kind of forget, we lose the anticipation of the future. I was reading what Paul wrote to his protege Timothy in the letter called 2 Timothy. Paul's aware that he's about to be killed. And in fact, pretty much straight after he wrote this letter, he was beheaded, history would tell us. He looks back over his life and he gives Timothy, his protege, some advice about, taking on this legacy and continuing to do well in ministry. Paul reflects on his life and writes this: as for me, my life has already been poured out as an offering to God. It's like, the offering bag that goes around. Paul's saying, my life's kind of like being placed in that offering bag. That's how I see what my life has been like. The time of my death is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have remained faithful. And now the prize awaits me, the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me on the day of his return. And the prize is not just for me, but for all who eagerly look forward to his coming. Paul's not been arrogant about his life. He's not saying he hasn't, messed up and botched up different things. But he's saying, as I look back at my life, I see that Jesus has been at the center. And I've made decisions in life with Jesus at the center. So my values and my behavior and the way I've lived and the way I've responded even to the moments in life I haven't got right, Jesus is at the center, and I'm trusting in that. He's my security. He's my identity. And so even though I'm about to die and sure enough, he's about to be beheaded, he looks forward to what's to come. He looks forward to the renewal of all things. It's not something that he drags his heels on. And I had to ask myself, am I eager? Am I looking forward to this? Am I full of anticipation? Might be a good question for you to ask yourself as well. Are you ready for Jesus' return? Do you look forward to Jesus' return? If you don't, maybe you kind of need to wrestle with some of these things in the future and the glorious future that we have, because that's the game changer. If we understand the glorious nature of this future, It affects the present. Now, it might be that you're here today and you don't know Jesus. You're not in you know who Jesus is, but you're not in a relationship with him. You don't find your security, your salvation, your identity in him. You kind of just depend on maybe your own performance, or you kind of just ditch the subject, don't really give it a lot of thought. And maybe somebody invited you to come today and you came really just out of politeness. But it's something you think about, are thinking about right now anyway. I'd encourage you to keep asking some questions. In fact, we have a group here called Alpha. It begins on Tuesday this week. There's lots of other people, probably just like you, with a lot of questions in mind, and the groups come together and they just explore what Christianity is all about, can ask any question they want to find out more. It's on Tuesday. You can ask somebody at the reception desk afterwards what it means to sign up for that. You actually know quite a bit about Christianity, but you've never actually responded. And by respond, simply mean, just actually talking to Jesus, which you can do even silently right now. And just say something like, Jesus, I actually want to be your follower. Still trying to explore this whole thing, but I'd like to lean into you to find my hope in you. That these things I'm hearing about who you are and about the future in the world, I like to experience the good thing of that for myself and for you to be at the center of my life. Just come up with your own words of that. The big thing is leaning in and actually expressing faith that you're wanting Jesus to be at the center. I'd love to chat with you, pray with you after the service. There's always a team back here on your way out who would love to do that any Sunday. Encourage you to do that today. It's going to give you a moment just to think about which of those three implications is kind of something that you need to think about today. What's the Spirit of God kind of prompting you on today? Is it the first one, to be urgently focused on witnessing? Maybe your lips have been sealed and you have kept your faith to yourself. Next Sunday, great opportunity to invite people. Maybe there's some people in your mind that you could take a next step about. Or it might be the second one, to be hopeful for the future. Maybe just experiencing the brokenness of life, either through your own health or something that's just going on around you, and it's just hard. What does it mean to be hopeful for the future? Or be ready in anticipation? Are you ready? Is Jesus really at the center of your life? Are you rightly related to him? What does it look like to be ready in anticipation? Just take a moment in quietness before I pray.